So if we look to the second teaching here, um, where Krishna answers Arjuna, tells him he has to fight. Um, Arjuna is at first shocked by this, as perhaps we are as readers, or at least surprised, that the voice of God would tell somebody to go out and kill. But he has a reason for that, and perhaps the whole book, and this would be beyond me, um, is giving the reasons for this. But there is one that's very striking, and that's given right at the beginning of his explanation here, where Krishna says, "You grieve for those beyond grief, and you speak words of insight, but learned men do not grieve for the dead or the living." Well, why would you not grieve for the dead? Well, one reason is because they're not really dead. You have to think about what you're doing as a soldier. And that's not just thinking of who the opponent is, but thinking about who you are. Krishna continues by saying, "Never have I not existed, nor you, nor these kings, and never in the future shall we cease to exist." Very okay. Well, what are you, Arjuna? Are you this body? Are these other human beings around you, are they their bodies, or are they something else? Um, Pretty amazing statement down here at the bottom where he says, right here, this is something worth thinking about. "Nothing of non-being comes to be, nor does being cease to exist. The boundary between these two is seen by men who see reality." What we find is that behind Krishna's answer to Arjuna is a very highly developed metaphysics, a theory of reality. And that is a theory of being. You and I and all other human beings, we are. And being something, being what we are, we cannot cease to exist. Now, that is not to say that our bodies can't go away. Of course they do. But we are not our bodies, Krishna is telling Arjuna. He says here, our bodies are known to end, but the embodied self, this notion of the self that is currently embodied, that is currently incarnated in this body, but the embodied self is enduring, indestructible and immeasurable. Therefore, Arjuna, fight the battle. He who thinks this self a killer and he who thinks it killed both fail to understand. It does not kill, nor is it killed. It is not born, it does not die. Having been, it will never not be. Unborn, enduring, constant, and primordial, it is not killed when the body is killed. So I guess if we wanted to simplify the answer or put it crudely, if you're worried about killing these people, don't worry, because you're not really killing them, because you can't. And they can't kill you. You can kill their bodies. You can destroy their bodies at least. And they could destroy yours, but that's not who you really are, and it's not who they really are. Whatever they really are is something that can't be killed. It's not something physical. It's not something made of physical matter. It's something else, what he calls the embodied self. Which is not something that can die because it's never been born. It's something eternal. And this leads to great description of reality, because what he's describing is an individual human being's connection with something transcendental, something beyond the physical, something beyond the things that we know through the senses, something that we can only grasp, well, with what? The intellect, the mind, the spirit. And the word spirit is not a bad word here. I think many philosophers in all traditions, certainly in the Western tradition, have tried to remind human beings that they are essentially spirit or mind and not essentially body. Now, we could, of course, in Hinduism, this leads directly to a theory of reincarnation. As a man discards worn out clothes to put on new and different ones, so the embodied self discards its worn out bodies to take on other new ones. That's fine, and that may be true. And I have fullest respect for this theory of reincarnation. But the truth is that as we follow what Krishna has to say to Arjuna, we don't have to go that far. That is, the first step, and I would say the most important step, is the distinction between the temporariness of the body and what Krishna is telling him is the permanence of the self. The second step, I suppose, would be to a full-blown theory of how that self is serially incarnated in different bodies in this way that is part of the Hindu religion. And again, that's fine and that's great, but I don't think you need to go that far. I think the most important step is, from Krishna's point of view, is to see that Arjuna's concerns are misguided because he is he's laboring under the illusion that what he sees through his senses is what is real. And so what he sees through his senses is blood and death and physical suffering, and that leads him to the position that he shouldn't fight the war because he doesn't want to create that suffering and carnage. But Krishna is telling him that has to be seen in a certain perspective, a wider perspective. No one likes war. No one likes physical suffering and violence. But it seen in the largest perspective, perhaps sometimes if you're a soldier, you have a duty to fight. And however unpleasant and disgusting, really, physical violence is, it may be that in certain very limited contexts, it's your social duty to engage in it, the duty to fight in a just war. Well, one may ask the question whether it is a just war in this case, but certainly Krishna, I think, takes the position that it is. But the wider perspective is that you are not your body. You are not going to die on this battlefield, and neither are they. They have a fate beyond this body. And whatever they are, essentially are, which is not body, it's not something that can be killed. There's an incredible passage here. It starts here, I think. Weapons do not cut it. Fire does not burn it. Waters do not wet it. Wind does not wither it. It cannot be cut or burned. It cannot be wet or withered. It is enduring, all-pervasive, fixed, immovable, and timeless. It is called unmanifest. Think about what's manifest is what is clear and at hand, what you can see and touch, what is on the outside. But the self is not like that. It's unmanifest, although it's, Krishna is saying, it's the realest thing of all. It's what is real in you and what it connects you up with what is real in the universe, which is ultimately him, right? God. It is called unmanifest, inconceivable, and immutable, right? That immutable part is really important because immutable means unchangeable. And the self, one of the reasons it can't be killed is because it can't be changed. I mean, it is what it is. So the notion that it could die, which is the most radical form of change there is absurd. And so I think that, okay, right, yes. Now this connects up with all the sort of other things about action, desire, how we deal with having bodies, and into the whole, fascinating philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita. Ultimately, I don't know how to characterize it with not going into the details of it, which we probably shouldn't do because we have enough to assimilate this in the first week of the class. but in a certain sense, what he's advising him is how do you live your life knowing that your eternal self, your enduring self, is what's most real about you, but at the same time you have this body for the moment, which is subject to all the desires and feelings that a human body is, the senses, pleasure and pain, desire, aversion. And this leads to a philosophy of discipline, of disciplined action, that one must act in this life, but with discipline. And ultimately, what that discipline, I think, is an understanding of what's real. And what's real, according to Krishna, is not what surrounds us physically or what we can access through our senses. What's real is something that is ideal. And this will probably help later on when we talk about Plato, especially the Phaedo, the arguments that Socrates offers for the immortality of the soul. But really, quite an amazing document. I would encourage you to read further into it. But really, I would say one of the most striking, dramatic positions I've ever read in any work, which connect up what you should do in a particular situation with an understanding of what you fundamentally are. And what Krishna is telling Arjuna, and therefore telling all of us, is that we are not our bodies. We are something. We are something else, harder to grasp in a certain respect because it's not something that's can be accessed through the senses, but nonetheless something more real.